Welcome to the Revenue Rewired podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO Jay Feitlinger and no-nonsense COO Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. Hello and welcome everybody to this special episode of the Revenue Rewired podcast. Hi, Jay.
Welcome home, Sarah.
Yes, as it's I was pleased by the Google alert that said it will be cooling in your area over the next 3 days. And I was like, oh, thank goodness.
Under 120 degrees. It's gonna be
It
great.
always is like weird when you land at the airport and it's dark and you're like, I need a swimsuit right now.
Nice. Hmm.
But I will say Arizona has the best sunsets. I miss them. I know this sounds
Hmm.
weird, like a
Yeah,
weird
they
thing
are
to
pretty.
miss, but yeah, I was like, I'm a sunset person.
Hmm.
I'm awake for sunrises, but I have weird thoughts when I'm traveling by myself, roaming streets, and I was like, I wonder if that's a question you could ask people like, are you a sunset or a sunrise person? What would you say?
Definitely a sunset. Sunrise, I'm sitting in front of my computer doing nonsense.
Well, like if you're on vacation, do you make it a point to wake up for a sunrise or to stay up for a sunset?
Sunset. Sunset cruises, a cocktail on the boat. Definitely a sunset guy.
Oh, that's so interesting. Hmm. Okay. I wonder what Rachel would say.
I have no idea. You can ask her.
I will. All right. Well, that might sound like a basic question, but it ties into our topic, which is do not overlook the basics. And there are a couple of things that we want to talk about in terms of what that means for you all. The basics could be anything from, I don't know, A to Z, you name it. But we really, I guess, get surprised by the basics. And, I think every business owner could say this about maybe some of their customers. But Jay, you shared with me a really interesting story about how the basics came up on a call. And I'd love for you to share that with our listeners.
Sure. So I'm part of this awesome networking group, and they just started up this new meeting type called Give and Get, which I'm like, okay, this sounds interesting. And I loved it. It was one of my favorite meetings I've had with this group in a while. And so the concept was is they limit it to I think a handful of people, so it's not going to be overwhelming. And you basically in the hour, you go through the process of explaining what you do, what your business does, your ideal client profile, the ICP. And then that's usually the first, I don't know, half an hour of that kind of conversation. And then the last half an hour, go person by person, and you have to now re-explain it from a kind of a LinkedIn Sales Navigator perspective. So those that are not familiar with LinkedIn Sales Navigator, it's a expensive premium upgrade you can get on LinkedIn and allows you to be more advanced regarding how you're sorting and finding prospective clients, developing lead lists, and doing some really smart work around reaching out to various different potential clients. And so the second half I found to be so intriguing, where everyone did a decent job in that first half. A lot of people definitely didn't understand the definition of elevator pitch. So some people went way too broad and all over the place, which again is not, unfortunately, not uncommon. We found when you ask the question of who is your ideal client, many businesses will be like everyone, which obviously that's not a good marketing strategy. But what I found really intriguing is the people that were the most broad and struggling on being really concise with their answers in that first half were the ones that struggled the most with the second half and just asking basic questions like industry, geography, employee headcounts, titles. People really struggled with this. And so, because being that this is a big part of what we do, I just couldn't help myself to kind of not take over the whole meeting in the last half. And I kind of walked them all through the process that we go through for our clients. And one of the guys that was struggling the most found so much value in that conversation where I offered him up. And again, if anyone wants this, I'm happy to share it as well. But I built out a very simple way of forcing people to think it through from like the LinkedIn Sales Navigator mindset, because I think it really teaches you how to get a little more narrow in like kind of the niche or focus area of your ideal client and keeping it basic. Which is why I'm kind of loving this conversation, is because I think often, especially business owners that are not marketing or sales, focused roles or experience, they're the ones that often struggle the most, where they have no problem in explaining what their business does and what they do to help their clients, but they really struggle to help define who their ideal client is because maybe they don't have that marketing or sales mind, in place. And so I came up with a process of kind of like customizing that model of kind of putting it in their words. So, for example, if they're a real estate company, obviously you would correlate it to like building a house, and I think if you could put things in common language like that and keeping it basic and not over complicating the whole process, I feel like people can really narrow down who their ideal client profile is.
Mm. And you mentioned that going through LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So I was thinking about this after we chatted before the call, and I'm like, that is probably not something a lot of people get into until, I don't know, they need something, right? Like I need to use this tool or I need to go find um, customers or whatever it is, and then they kind of get overwhelmed and they quit, right? But that is probably one of the fastest ways to start figuring some of that out is LinkedIn Sales Navigators giving you fields to help guide you through that process. Now, I think it's continued to get better. I mean, you've been using it for like what, at least 10 years,
Oh, at least I've
right?
been, yeah, definitely a dork when it comes to getting into that early space.
And what's interesting is that as we've seen with LinkedIn Sales Navigator, that's also the same layout as a lot of AI search tools.
Yep.
And so as you're thinking about this, it isn't just a LinkedIn process or a prospect finding tool process. It's a really easy way to say, okay, if I'm going to fill out like a form, could I fill it out with some of this basic information, just like, what's your first name, last name, email, phone number, that kind of thing. I think that's one of the easiest ways for people to get started. But, you mentioned that it's a lot of the basics. So what are a couple of the things that people get really hung up on when it comes to like even just using the sales navigator example and like the elevator pitch, which I don't know if that is a phrase that's kind of phasing out, just because that's a very in-person comment, like
Sure.
having a conversation inside an elevator. Do you have a short enough time to explain what you do to someone before they get off the elevator? Now, it has its own kind of like meaning behind it, but that's also something that is it like the gold, I'd say call it like a goldfish pitch because on
Hmm.
digital, people have even less attention span.
Yep.
They just scan through some of the words. So your elevator pitch actually needs to be even more concise and shorter. It's almost like a abstract to what you're actually trying to say. So what are like maybe if you're to give our audience two of the biggest hangups that stop them from fulfilling this search process or this kind of like we'll call it like a form fill for what their
Sure.
business is. What are those things?
All right, so two. Wow. I've got so many. Let's do this. I kind of already alluded to it. I think the biggest one, and this is what helped this gentleman this morning on my last call, um, is not being so broad. So let me give you an example of that. When I asked him the question of like, okay, let's go down to the actual role level, walk me through the ideal role of your ideal client. And his answers were owner, CEO, CTO, CEO, product developer, marketing manager, office manager. And I said, okay, so now let's use that kind of elevator pitch element because to me, which is again why StringCam was born, it was all about the communication was a big thing about, how this, business came about 16 years ago. And I'm like, pretend now you're walking into a room and you had all those people in the room. Would you talk to the product developer or the office manager or the owner of a $25 million business the exact same way? And he's like, of course not. I'm like, okay, well, that alone then tells you that you're being too broad. It's like I think, people think that by going into like a tool like LinkedIn Sales Navigator or Zoom Info, whatever tool you're using to get access to a database to find potential new clients, if you give it all the things, all the industries and all the titles and all the geographies and all the head counts, all that stuff, yes, you're going to end up with a much larger database. But then what are you going to do with it? You're going to walk into this room and it's going to have all these people with name tags on it, and you're going to have no clue. It's like almost like a pinball game. You're going to have no clue what to say to each person because it's just not been very strategic. And so I'm like, okay, let's go now back into your last three favorite deals you did. What were the titles? And all three were almost the exact same title with, VP versus director versus whatever, but they were a similar kind of role. So I'm like, why don't we just start with that? And so I guess to answer your question on the first one, I just feel like people that are too broad with stuffing all of those, as you called it, fields, all those like filtering parameters for finding someone, that's where I think you're going to go the wrong direction because in that scenario, a larger database does not mean better. I would much more prefer to have a database of 520 people that all had similar psychographics, with the motivations and pain points and role and whatnot, so I can really tailor how I'm going to provide them value, than it being this like completely generic, model. So that would probably be the first one is not being, so broad in the focus. And I think the second one I think is honestly is like pressure testing it. So I already kind of alluded to this one as well, is, you know, the gentleman on the call we had this morning kept bringing up like, oh, I wish I had blah, blah, blah on my team here because they would have different input than I would because I'm not as involved in doing the sales or marketing of our business. I'm the owner of the company. And so I think for me, it's like I think we all make these assumptions either driven off of ego. For example, like I think, to be fully candid about this one, this was one that I personally was a victim of, self-induced, where, probably 10 plus years ago, when I would go into LinkedIn Sales Navigator, I would put in, 5 million to 250 million or whatever the number I would go up to. And yes, I would get some very impressive enterprise, more, based companies I would love to support. But in the day, and then I guess day, that was not really kind of our ideal client. Yes, it's an outlier that we can support them, but not exactly who we are servicing today. And so I think pressure testing the assumptions you have across other team members, you have your current, favorite clients, or maybe even your least favorite clients. And again, just fine tuning it. Because again, I think with both those two recommendations, I think quality is more important than quantity for you to help keeping it basic and figuring out a strategy. Because to your point, Sarah, there's been so many situations we've had for clients where they give us, the parameters. We obviously push back and fine tune it with them. And then we go and get access to a database like through LinkedIn or AI or Zoom Info, whatever, ends up having, 25 or 35,000 contacts on it. And it's so big that you feel paralyzed. But if you had a list of like under 1,000 people, now all of a sudden it feels a lot more possible to reach out to these people, and building a more tailored, personalized approach.
Yeah, and where we're kind of going with this is as marketers, the ICP is one of the basics for building out kind of like your whole messaging approach and everything else about your business is because who are you servicing is really like the one of the biggest foundations, if maybe tied with what you do is who you're doing it for. And what we see, and I've seen it actually a lot more in the past, not as much now, but here's where you've got some dangers you've got to look out for with AI too, is by trying to build some of this stuff basically through AI as an example, you're going to get the same stuff everyone else is doing. And while it is helpful to maybe help you kind of like you could train a project or a GPT to act like what Jay was saying and help me pressure test this. What's my elevator pitch? I want it to be blank. And is it achieving these things? Is it understandable, concise? Could someone else repeat it without, having heard it 30 times? That stuff is really helpful, but it's not going to help you dig deeper into what those kind of like specifics are. It's going to give you what it would give anyone else, like a competitor of yours, for example. And so, where we as a marketing agency help clients like make this more robust, I would say, is they'll come to us with, we've got colors, we've got a vision, we've got a mission, and here's who we're going to service.
Mm.
And 9 times out of 10, we're like, okay, well, you're going to need about 40 different campaigns because these people are not in the same places at the same time
Or different
looking for the
languages.
same things. Yeah, it's basically a completely different language. And that is one of the hardest conversations I've seen us have to have is who am I saying no to? And so by having that understanding, creating, if you want to look at it that way, the inverse of what we're saying is who am I comfortable saying no to? And you're pressure testing, remember? So, and even in our business, there are some outliers where, it's like based on everything we know about you and how we would work together in the future and our vast experience, we all have so much experience in so many industries. We could 100% help you because it's similar to who we're helping solve problems for on the daily over in this area. And so it's okay to have that, but the whole like enterprise to startup, those are so vastly different that you really can't create a lot of overlap or comparisons with those types of companies. But by using some sort of like outside party, I think helps you dig in a little bit deeper to kind of pressure test that a little bit more based on what is in the market already and what they're seeing versus it's just kind of very two-dimensional where I see a lot of people are using AI to help them unpack this or just using Navigator, which still it's just a search tool, but it's not a is this a fit tool? It's kind of like a dating app.
Oh my God, it's so
I
funny.
mean, isn't it? It's like, okay, check off these boxes, but when you meet them, it's like, oh, you didn't iron your shirt or roller skated here and I'm super into motorcycle. I don't know. Just like,
Oh my
is
God,
the
there's
fit even there? Because that's where a lot of organizations get really frustrated, where they feel like it's my ICP isn't working. And I feel like I'm talking to them and they're just not hearing me. And that's part of it is you have to figure out is that matching in the market and can marketing reach those people concisely and clearly and quickly enough. And that's where we go a lot deeper into like brand development and stuff like that, where I think it's AI can help you get there. And I'm seeing a lot of really cool projects and ways to kind of unpack that, but it's just not the same, I think.
Well, I think what I love is you bring up the dating analogy. Honestly, I think is so beyond solid because and obviously this is a little different because LinkedIn in theory should not be a dating place, but we've seen weird things so far on LinkedIn even. But if you think about it from that kind of mindset, it's like not only do you want to put your best forward, but you want this to be a value for both parties. And again, it's like, yeah, maybe from a sales or messaging or marketing side, you could do an amazing job to convince anyone that you might be a great solution for them. But in the end of the day, I think it might not be a long-term value. And so, you want this to be a long-term relationship. And that's why I think it's worth the investment of energy to really kind of that fit test, I think is solid. And again, that's why I love the LinkedIn Sales Navigator example is because if you can't go on LinkedIn, Sales Navigator, or even LinkedIn's the free version, you could do a little bit of this with the Boolean strings and the filtering and whatnot. But if you can't go on there within, let's say, 10 seconds and exactly find a decent number of people that match that, and it's not 300,000, then I think that tells you right there that you're just not doing this the right way. And I think where I think the owners like me cause the most problems is that FOMO. And that's really when I reflect a little bit on myself and I'm like, oh my gosh, we've helped so many enterprise based companies and we've actually even helped startups and we're all over the place. because I love helping everyone. And at the end of the day, it's like, to be fair on the marketing side, and I loved your example about the 40 different campaigns and probably need a much larger budget, is it's not fair to your business development and marketing efforts and even your onboarding and client service and operations team because if you're just trying to service everyone, you're just going to be impossible to build out a process to scale the business in a way that's going to make it efficient, past that, $10 million number. And so if your intention is you want this to be more than a lifestyle business and you want this to be, a 25, 50, $200 million, whatever size company, you've got to get really smart about building out the process on how to talk to exactly the right person so that way it feels like a one-to-one versus shotgun approach. So I love when you were kind of talking about the dating mindset because that's kind of, I guess, how I think about this is that I really want to figure out who in this world we could provide the most amazing experience and opportunity to and value to. And that's what we want to focus on because back to the gentleman this morning, I'm like, okay, let's take a step back here because I see where we're going with this. How many clients you really need to bring on a month to hit your goals? He's like, I just need one. I'm like, so then why do we need to have a database of 312,433 people? I mean, unless your sales conversion rate is beyond horrible, which I'm sure it's not, you don't need that big of a database. So if we just had 1,000 people, that alone will cover you for probably a year or two on you doing a really proactive, business development and marketing approach. And so I think it helped open up his eyes to, okay, I guess I don't have to try to service the whole world. If I can just pick a lane, and stay focused on it for a solid, 2 quarters or so, then I think you're gonna have much better success.
I love that. Yeah, and to me, I was thinking like, okay, the struggle of this would be like every single day you pick a new AI tool and you're going to use that tool that day, and the next day you're going to use a different tool. To
Oh
me,
my
that's what
God.
this feels like because you're not learning anything, which is the FOMO part. Where can I be niche enough to learn from this process? Like, what are my and we've kind of talked about this as a company, we can do a better job of having like a hypothesis or a theory on what we think is going to work. Because fortunately or unfortunately, marketing is not a perfect science. Humans are not as predictable as we would like them to be. They're decently predictable, but they still,
Hmm.
are not. And that's where we have to find those refinements. And so the basics can help you understand what the predictable pieces are. But then by learning from that small sample size or that small group, then you're starting to uncover oh, they seem to all. I think you actually, where did I see this? Like a week or so ago, someone asked, where is it that you think they're falling off on? At which stage in their buyer journey are they most kind of like abandoning the process? And that's where you can start looking at stuff like that and moving into, okay, here's what my ICP is needing from me. And then you build out sales materials and marketing materials. And it sort of is this beautiful waterfall approach into helping the rest of your business all say the same things so that you have a lot of consistency throughout the entire organization from sales and marketing through the whole customer experience. And I really love the beautiful waterfall. I'm running my hands up and down the wall, people, if you
It's
can.
very soothing.
It's
It's
very
very
soothing.
relaxing.
And so that's
Well, I
kind of
think
like that's what
well, I
I'm
was going to
thinking
add,
like,
I guess, real
whew.
fast on that is like I again tie back into the whole basics thing. I think this is great because again, I had a call last week with a gentleman and we talked a little bit about the whole ICP part, which I totally agree with you, Sarah. It's probably when you're going to be building a business or launching a new market or whatever, you're trying to do some kind of enhancement around growth and you're trying to obviously accelerate your revenue, like what you do and who you do it for are just so beyond critical to fully understand and make it super um, clear and basically run it through like the fit test of a Zoom Info or a LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Because if it's not going to produce what you need, you're going to have a problem. But the second issue that I had on this call last week was talking about the analytics side that you were just touching in on regarding like, okay, once I understand who we're best servicing for what we do, I want to figure out why we have so much friction where we're getting people visiting our website, but they're not filling out the form. And so this person I was talking to about a week or so ago was an engineer. And so he started going down the path. Again, typical owner trying to solve the problem without understanding how marketing or analytics works, started building out to me a 16-point strategy regarding how we're going to figure this all out and put all this stuff in place to kind of think it through. I'm like, okay, well, keeping it basic first, let's first install analytics on your website because you don't even have that in place. So that's like ultimate basic. But I think from there, before we start over engineering all of this stuff, being that you have such little traffic and you're getting so few leads for this new offering, why don't we just build in the start and the end and just see if we even capture data there and then build off from there? Because I feel like what typical kind of entrepreneurs or owners do is, which I think is good about them, they're able to think through the whole entire house being fully built and lived in and interior designed and all this stuff. But I think right now is if you don't know what you don't know, it might be good just to have the basics in place of the next thing you want to do is like, what question are we trying to answer to understand what's working, what's not, and really what's the start and the end of that? And just start with that from the basics perspective, and then give it a month or two or three, because you might find the issue is not that you don't have a 16-step analytical tracking process in place. You might find that no one's interested in the content that you produced. And so if you're seeing a bunch of people visiting, a landing page or a quiz or whatever the entry point is, and they aren't even starting that first step, which is like answer question one, or they go to fill out the form, or they download, or whatever the thing is you're trying to get them to do. If they aren't even doing that, the problem might be it might be on more on the pre-sale side or the messaging side. So I just find that it's much better to be efficient on knowing what you're trying to answer and how best to do it, versus trying to over-engineer it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that
I
because
think
I
it's
feel like we
good.
gave everyone a lot.
Yep. Let's wrap
All
this one up
right.
then.
Well, as always, if you guys have questions, we would be happy to help you. And also, if you want to pressure test with us, we are excellent. Jay does it with all kinds of people all the time.
Even my
It's just kind of
daughters,
fun. Yeah. Which I'd love to
which
hear
is
their
very
feedback.
weird.
But yeah, we hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Rewired podcast. Send us your questions to podcast@stringcaninteractive.com and follow us for more insights to drive your business forward.